Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today on this frigid day. If you're somewhere in the polar freeze, we hope you're warm, but we appreciate you taking the time to join us for this month's Less Stressed Parenting webinar. And we have a wonderful guest with us today, Dr. Rebecca Resnik, and she's going to talk to us about building resilience, helping students thrive in the face of challenges. Dr. Rebecca Resnik is a highly respected psychologist and founder of Resnik Psychology. I also like to call her my friend. I very much respect her personally, and I am just a fan of her speaking and very, very happy that she's here today. I once heard her years ago and was just so impressed that I always want to chase after her and see where she's speaking next and learn something from her. So I hope you guys feel the same way. Dr. Rebecca Resnik specializes in supporting students with ADHD, anxiety, and learning differences. And she brings a wealth of knowledge about helping children and teens build resilience in the face of academic and personal challenges, which teens are not going through that today. Navigating school and life can be incredibly challenging for students who experience ADHD, anxiety, and learning differences. And as parents, we always want to support them in building confidence as they learn their coping skills, and we want to teach them, as well as everybody around them, that they can advocate for themselves. We want them to have that good, strong self-confidence to know what they need and ask for it. So today she'll share expert strategies for fostering emotional growth and encouraging self-advocacy, as we mentioned, and creating a supportive environment that allows students to grow and thrive. This session will be particularly wonderful for parents, educators, and anyone who works with students with learning differences. So with that, I just want to say thank you so much, Rebecca, for being here. Thank you so much for giving us your time today and for getting to wherever you are to give this, because it's just all ice out there. So thank you. And with that, I will actually turn it over to Dr. Rebecca Resnik.
Okay, hi everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming. Wendy, I see that the front slide is there. Do you want me to go ahead and share at this point? Are you done sharing?
I did. It did not come. I'm not sharing anymore.
That's okay. I'm going to take over and
Is it letting you?
we'll see. Okay, you can see my application apparently, and here we go. So as I start talking, I recommend that you basically either hide my face panel or put it down in the right-hand corner. If you have it at the top of the screen, it might hide some of the information, so that makes life a little bit easier. Welcome, everybody. I am so pleased to be here. It was such a treat to be invited by Wendy. She's such a force to be reckoned with in our community, advocating for young people with learning disabilities and supporting them. And, the feeling of watching you work and enjoying that and being inspired by it is very mutual. So today we're talking about raising resilient teens. Before I get into the specifics of like what the research says, let's just ground ourselves a little bit. So I first became a parent. I first became a step parent back when my now 32-year-old stepson was about 6 years old. And so I've had the experience of parenting a millennial and parenting someone from Gen Z. Both of these generations get a really bad rap, very unfairly, in my opinion. But what I want you to know about that experience is how different it was parenting a millennial compared to what we're dealing with now. If you are feeling kind of lost as a parent, overwhelmed, feeling like a lot of the parenting advice out there just doesn't work all that well, it is not about you being a bad parent. This is a particularly difficult and challenging time to be raising kids. There's nothing inherently wrong with kids in Gen Z or Gen Alpha. They're coming up in a time where everything is kind of up for grabs, and we don't often know how to prepare them for the future, how to ensure that they're going to be successful. So let's remember for a moment that we're up against a lot. And this list of issues are the kinds of things that the parents who come to see me and my colleagues are worrying about. Back when I was raising my stepson, there were no school shootings that, most people thought about. We didn't have the experience of having lived through a terrorist attack on American soil. Cyberbullying, if you wanted to bully someone online, you had to push 3 buttons to text one letter at a time. The level of cyberbullying was nothing compared to what it is now. Now we have sexting, hate crimes, rates of suicide are higher, really pathological behaviors like cutting yourself or starving yourself. These things are now like popularized and common, whereas back when my stepson was young, these were really rare. We now have even more dangerous drugs that our young people are exposed to. Back when I was young, I'm 51 years old, cannabis was not that scary a thing, and I never even saw it until I was in college. But now cannabis is so potent that a significant number of kids who try it actually experience psychotic episodes. And never mind the fact that a college education now is ballooning in cost compared to incomes. And fun fact, you probably would not get admitted to your college alma mater with your test scores and your GPA and your set of extracurriculars that you earned back when you were young. This is a whole new ball game now. And again, if you're feeling stressed as a parent, it is not because you're a bad parent. It is because nothing that your parents or aunts or uncles or grandparents had to teach you about raising kids really translates all that well into raising kids in the 21st century in the post-pandemic world. And one thing I want you to keep in mind through this presentation is that we're going to come back to positive communication with teenagers, the importance of keeping communication open. This literally saves lives. So as you start thinking about, I wonder if I could use that, I wonder if I could try that, keep in mind that if your only thing you're really able to do is keep the communication open between you and your young person when they're struggling, you are already doing a lot. Of course, I started off by talking about all the negative things, but we have to remember too that this generation of kids is really wonderful. We have kids doing all sorts of fantastic service projects. We have a generation of kids who are eradicating the stigma around having learning disabilities, attention problems, struggling with your mental health. We have a generation of kids who are not afraid to get help. And we have a generation of kids who care deeply about social justice, the planet, and being kind to each other. So I'm personally very excited about this generation and excited about what they're going to do. So again, to ground ourselves in reality, if you're old enough to remember the movie The Princess Bride, there's a wonderful quote that the handsome Wesley says to Princess Buttercup, and he says, "Life is pain, Highness. Anyone who says differently is selling something." Our job as parents is not to wrap our kids in bubble wrap and make everything easy and fun for them. Our job is to help them get through life when things are going bad. The Marines have a saying, embrace the suck. And as parents, we don't particularly love the idea that our job is to help our kids embrace things that suck and feel hard and feel boring. But at the end of the day, that's really what it is all about. Another thing to remember about teenagers is that even though this generation of teens seems to have so much more in terms of material possessions, privileges, and all sorts of great things at their disposal, a lot of teens, as Wendy alluded to, are not okay. We have to remember that for every teenager coming up, all of the problems of being a teenager are brand new. They don't have the experience that they can have a bad day and recover. They can lose someone special and be okay. They can get through a lot of setbacks. Again, it's our job as parents to teach them that. And the reason I put up this clip from Will Smith's very famous video, Parents Just Don't Understand, is to remind us all about the importance of communication and letting our kids know that we do really understand what it's like to be a teenager. We don't understand what it's like to be a teenager now, but we can empathize and we can sympathize and we can be there for them. So this wonderful quote by Haim Ginott, many teenagers are tormented by terrors that they think are private and personal. They don't know that their anxieties and the struggles they're going through are actually really pretty universal. So, what does the research actually say about how we promote resilience? The term resilience was co opted by psychology. It actually came from the study of metals, metallurgy. And a metal that is very resilient can be pounded and melted and twisted and stretched, and it still maintains its properties. It doesn't break, it bends. And that's the important thing when we're thinking about getting our kids through the tough spots of life is we really want them to be able to bend and bounce back instead of breaking. So the research emphasizes four areas that I'll talk about today, one of which is cognitive framing. It's the story we tell ourselves. It's how do we think about and talk to ourselves about it when something bad happens or a setback happens or we're feeling really stressed. We'll talk about stress inoculation, which is the same thing as when you get your COVID vaccine and your body learns to fight off that particular virus. We learn to fight off stress and we learn to cope with stress by being exposed to it. The importance of relationships again, if you take nothing away from this beyond keep the communication open and surround your child with fantastic mentors, coaches, tutors, teachers, clergy, anybody who can help you parent your child. You really want to have that village. And of course, failure matters a lot. If our kids are coasting through life and never breaking a sweat, never feeling unsure about themselves, never taking enough risks and experiencing some mild non-catastrophic failures, they're not well prepared. And we do see in my practice quite a few young people who had the intellectual gifts to go to a very tough college, but who come back in the first part of their freshman year, not because they weren't smart, but because their executive functioning skills weren't where they needed to be, and they didn't know how to push through and tolerate failure and make sure that they learn from their mistakes. One way that we build resilience is through literally stress inoculation. And we can learn this from animal parents out in the wilderness. It's a big deal for animal parents to push their little ones out of the nest, to push them to hunt for themselves, forage for themselves, learn to climb trees. You know, you can see this mother bear, she's encouraging her cub to climb, even though the higher he goes, yes, the more potential that he could fall. Building acceptable levels of risks into our children's life is really important, and we want to start that early on. As a parent of Gen Z kids, I do understand that a lot of the time, because we have very little time with them, because we are experiencing work creep, where our work invades our holidays, it invades our evenings, our vacations, you know, even people, if you could go to get your toes done at the spa, you'll see people are working on their laptops and their phones like while they're getting their toes done. That never happened in our parents' generation. So bringing it back, we want to make sure to build in opportunities for our kids to take on more responsibility. But again, I understand why we don't. We don't because we don't have a lot of time. You know, back in our parents' generation, there were still a lot of folks who were full-time parents, and the workday ended pretty much at 5. And so there was a lot of time to teach your kids how to mow the lawn, how to take out the garbage, how to sew a button back on, just how to handle life's problems and take on a lot of chores. Well, now when we only have maybe an hour to spend with our kids every working day, sometimes it's even less, we don't tend to have a lot of time to let them try things for themselves. And stepping back and getting out of the habit of, well, it's just faster and we'll have more time together if I just do it. Getting into the habit of stepping back and saying to yourself, is this one of those opportunities that I have to let them experience some safe stress, some safe frustration? Can I actually pull back here, even though it may mean that they do the wash and they leave that one red sweater in and it ruins a load of laundry? Those kinds of things are actually really key. They're much better at building up resilience than, say, taking, 20 hours a week of SAT prep classes. We have to remember that stress and anxiety are actually our friends. There's a particularly adaptive level of stress. And if you remember your psychology coursework, if you took AP Psych or Psych classes, you learned about a law called the Yerkes-Dodson law. And what this tells us is that there's optimal levels of stress. And one of the reasons I like referring to places like Illuminos is because those tutors are very good, tutors and coaches, sorry, at balancing, keeping those kids in the optimal level of stress zone. If we didn't have stress and anxiety, we would just lay around all day eating Doritos and smoking pot. We don't really want that. But the trick about stress is that it needs to be at the right level for the right circumstance. My son here, when he was little, we went over to my friend's house and they staged this picture where he's about to be, killed by a giant spider. But I guarantee you, if this was a real spider, he shouldn't be just lying there playing around. He should be running away. It's all about budgeting your stress response to match the actual context of whatever it is you're experiencing. So when we have too little stress, we don't have that get up and go. We don't have that drive that, gets us out of bed in the morning, makes us study for tests, makes us take, a higher level of calculus than we might have originally thought we could do. But again, if we are in the too much stress zone, our ability to concentrate, focus, learn, remember, sleep, all of that falls apart. So the trick with our kids is to pair them up with the helpers in their lives who really understand how to push. Because again, a lot of times we're either giving them too little stress and they're getting all A's, and they're equating getting all A's with like not having to work. Well, we don't want that, because eventually they are going to be in a situation, it might not be to grad school, it might not be to medical school, where they're going to have to push themselves. But remember, there's that optimal level of stress. And when we're experiencing too much stress, our brains literally go into a kind of tunnel vision. And that tunnel vision is our body and brain's natural stress response. That stress response is great at like getting us away from a hyena. It's terrible for functioning in a classroom. So the optimal tutor, coach, or testing person or teacher is going to be able to balance for your kid that optimal level of stress, where they're excited and motivated to keep pushing themselves, but they're not actually under the wave. Remember that humans are very good at reacting quickly to acute stress. That's how we're designed. But humans, and especially teenagers, we are terrible at tolerating chronic stress. And life for Gen Z, ever since the pandemic, has been just this nonstop carousel of chronic stress. And it seems to these kids that the level of stress demands on them, demands to be perfect, to get into the most selective college ever, to take the hardest courses, to take, 10 AP tests over the course of their high school career. This is a level of unhealthy stress that never goes away. And so when our kids' lives are nothing but push, 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 go, 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 they don't have time to recover. And again, when you don't have time to recover, you're really not there for learning and focusing. Teenage brains are particularly vulnerable to stress because they're under construction. The great part about teenagers is that everything is so new and exciting. And I really love that teenage energy and creativity, that teenage laughter, that sense of energy you have when your teenagers are around. But of course, sometimes when things are under construction, they don't work all that well. And sort of the classic teenage moodiness, teenage frustration, that's really not about their hormones. It has nothing to do with their levels of testosterone and estrogen. Those actually peak well before puberty. This has to do with the fact that their brain is undergoing a remodeling project. And so they often need more support than we as adults do, or even younger children do, to manage day-to-day stressors. We have two ways that are sort of baked into our DNA about how we respond to anxiety. We can either approach it, and approaching anxiety and trying to really control it and beat it into submission. You can see this in your kid if your child is engaging in a lot of perfectionism, compulsiveness, and inflexibility. That's approach style responses to anxiety. And a little bit of this is okay, but once you get into being over perfectionistic, too rigid, too compulsive, that's when it becomes self-sabotaging. A lot of us, when we're stressed and anxious, we engage in what's called avoidance. And avoidance is very natural, right? If you put your hand on a hot stove and you get burned, you are not likely to do that again. That's learning and growing. That's good stuff. But unfortunately, for a lot of our kids, they're avoiding anxiety-provoking experiences that they actually really need to grow. If we don't stretch ourselves and experience anxiety, just like going to the gym, if we don't strengthen our physical muscles, then we're not getting stronger. For a lot of kids now, their response is too often avoidance. And when we see them shutting down, not going to school, not socializing, and we see that beautiful spark of motivation kind of get doused, this is when we know that the avoidance behaviors have now become a real problem. And the problem with the more we avoid stressors, the better we feel because we feel relief. But of course, the problem is then we don't learn how to manage them, and our sense of being inadequate grows and festers and progresses just like a fungus. So if you're seeing that your kid is engaging in too many avoidance behaviors or too many approach behaviors, it's definitely time to get help. And that can be somebody like a tutor or a coach. It could be a guidance counselor at school, an advisor, a mentor, a psychotherapist. There's a lot of helpers out there, and you don't need to go it alone. Remember that success depends on persisting through frustration. Yoda is one of the great examples of a teacher who knew how hard to push. Luke's not a great example of a student because he was always whining and he gave up on his training before he finished, and yet somehow has Jedi skills. I don't know. But remember, for our day-to-day, a lot of what we need to do for our children is not prevent them from being frustrated, but teach them how to deal with it. Watch them be frustrated without jumping in to solve the problem. As the saying goes, don't just stand there, or don't just, sorry, brain glitch. What we want to remember as parents is don't just do something, sit there. Sit back, be there if something goes horribly wrong, but push them to experience some frustration, whether it be having to mow the lawn on a hot day, or having to load the dishwasher after somebody made spaghetti last night, having to go out on a cold day and walk the dog, having to take a harder class. This is good parenting. When we get them in that zone where they're pushing themselves just enough so that we're providing stress inoculation. And as parents, here's the things that we tend to do, and I do these too, that are not helpful. If you as parents can eliminate these 4 phrases from your vocabulary, that will go a long way towards keeping the communication open between you and your teenager, and, word to the wise, between you and your spouse or partner as well. So catch yourself before you go into saying, why don't you just? Especially for our kids with ADHD, they hear this all the time. Why don't you just do your homework? Why don't you just get a folder? Why don't you just do a planner? They would if they could, but they need to actually be taught how to do that. These types of executive functioning skills that kids need to be successful in modern high school in the year 2025, they're not intuitive. So remember, get rid of why don't you just. Also, get rid of can't you. Can't you is a super judgy, mean statement. If I come home after a busy day of work and I'm venting about, all the stress I've experienced, and my husband says like, well, can't you just blah, blah, blah? It's going to be a bad night for him and a bad night for me, because can't you is very invalidating, and it makes the person who hears it feel really stupid and inadequate. Not a positive thing to say to our young people. Have you tried use with caution? Sometimes it's helpful, like if your kid is trying to make dinner for the first time, you might say something like, have you tried giving the oven all of its time to preheat before you put the chicken in, that kind of thing. But a lot of times when we as parents are trying to be helpful and we're saying, have you tried, have you tried, have you tried, or you should, there's a power differential there. And if you remember back to being a teenager, again, think of the video Parents Just Don't Understand. Kids don't like to feel preached to and told what to do any more than I do as a 50-year-old woman. The best people that we have in our lives are the people who don't talk down to us. It's the same for teenagers, especially because they are so sensitive to criticism, because they're still, vulnerable. They're trying to figure things out. So word to the wise is I usually tell parents, don't say anything to your teenager that you wouldn't say to a colleague at work, especially if it's a situation where somebody has just screwed up or made a mistake and you need to process it with them. pretending that we as adults have a lot of easy answers that are necessarily going to work for them in the context of what they're going through right now can be very alienating for them. What we can do as parents is an old strategy called name it and tame it. When we give a name to what somebody's feeling, or we really try to reflect back to them what it must be like for them, you will immediately see that the stress level goes down. So instead of being like, you should do this, can't you just do that? Why don't you try? You should. Back off from that and help your young person actually get in touch with what's going on in their own brain. You won't make your kid angrier or sadder or more frustrated by trying to understand what's going on with them. That's a different thing than like preaching about what they should do. This is taking a step back and just trying to understand, not to control, but to understand. So remember, name it and tame it. Non-judgmental descriptive phrases, when you're genuinely coming at them with empathy and trying to understand, this usually goes really well. And if it doesn't go really well, then typically a young person is like way up here in terms of their stress level, and they need a little time to settle before they're ready to process things with words. So we can use phrases like, how embarrassing. I hated taking tests too. Oh my goodness. One of the happiest days of my life was when I never had to take another math class ever again and another math test ever. It was beautiful. Saying things like that must have hurt. High school can be overwhelming. I say this to my kids all the time. I mean, now I have one out of college, one in college, and one still at home. But I will often say to them, look, high school's not always fun. It's really overwhelming. It's a lot of pressure. And somehow the media makes it seem like everybody's partying and having a great time and getting, straight A's and, without ever breaking a sweat. Acknowledge for them that there's just a lot of days that suck and feel awful. And that's okay. We can sit with that and we'll get through it. Things like you were caught off guard, particularly a useful phrase when something happens like they forgot to turn in homework, they forgot to study for a test, they blew off a project by accident, instead of saying like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that. Now your grade is going to go down to a D. This is terrible, blah, blah, blah. Opening up the conversation with like, you were really caught off guard, you were surprised, that must have felt awful, gets them into much more of a problem-solving headspace. And of course, one of my favorites, that's really disappointing. I like hearing that when I've had a bad day or something hasn't gone well, and sounds very stressful. All of these things you can say to your kids, and you can say to your friends and your colleagues and your spouse and everybody else, because they bring the tension down and they get everybody in much more of an open communicative frame of mind. Very important is that we often assume that because we know how to do something, that it should be obvious to our kids. And this is a Trevor Noah quote that I really like a lot. This is, people love to say, give a man a fish and he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish and he'll eat for a lifetime. What they don't say is, and it would be nice if you gave him a fishing rod. That's the part of the analogy that's missing. This is missing for a lot of our kids because teachers are under huge amounts of pressure to teach content. They have to get through the entire AP US history curriculum. They have to get through all of calculus curriculum, all of chemistry. For elementary and middle school, they have to get kids through a huge scope and sequence of the curriculum because they're going to be standardized tests coming up in the spring. So what's really missing from our American schools is teaching kids how to learn, teaching them how to be organized, how to study, how to take notes, how to check for their own understanding, when to study, how to manage their time. We don't teach these things. And so it's no wonder that a lot of kids are pretty clueless, even if they're smart, because these things don't come naturally. They really have to be taught, and they have to be taught in a respectful mentoring relationship. Because most of school is the teacher provides the information and the kid is supposed to be like this passive vessel that soaks up the information. That's not teaching kids how to learn. Now, some private schools do a really wonderful job of providing a lot of executive functioning support and even sometimes specific skills. But two of my boys went to private, or one of my sons went to private school, but two of my sons didn't. And so there were definitely times when it felt like the teacher was just doing what the teacher in Ferris Bueller did, just spewing out this information. And if my kids could catch it, great. But if they couldn't, they were really out of luck. So remember, we build resilience by actually solving problems. And how do we build more problem-solving opportunities into our day-to-day life with our kids? I hate to say it, but they have to do more chores and they have to do meaningful chores and contribute to the family. Again, I know this sucks down a lot of time. And I know that, look, I'm on my third teenager. Teenagers don't always do things very well. I have eaten quite a few dinners that did not taste particularly good or were a little burnt. My youngest son, he loves baking. I've eaten a lot of burned charcoaly cookies, but that's okay. I want kids doing chores and responsibilities. Again, in our modern world where we outsource everything from like cleaning the house to fixing things to sewing to mowing the lawn, our kids are kind of chore deprived. And the time to learn how to do laundry is not October of your freshman year at college. Um, we have to teach them we have to help them learn problem solving tools. And again, remember that if your kid is in public school, like my youngest is still in public school, they're probably not getting a lot of that. So you have to dig sometimes and find the people who can teach these things. Sports, activities, and clubs. If you have a kid who's more reluctant to join clubs, remember they're really important. They are resilience builders, especially sports. If you try to invite them to join things and it's just falling on deaf ears, they want to sit in their room playing Xbox or being on TikTok all day long, enlist the cavalry, right? Get the guidance counselor to pull them aside, get a coach, clergy member, someone out who is not their parent to talk with them about how important it really is for them to be doing something that is like a learning leisure activity. And oftentimes I will say to, you know, parents like, look, this isn't a choice. So get the guidance counselor to basically bring out the whole website all about the activities that your kid could be doing at school and say, I want you to pick two. Don't make it like just an open-ended, oh, you should be doing something. Have somebody actually help them figure out what's a good match for them. Self-advocacy is really important. And when you understand how you learn best, when you understand your diagnosis, when you understand your learning differences, your neurodiversity, that's when you understand what you need, you can tell people what you need, and you know how to get it. You have to learn to work the system in this world. Because if you're just sitting by being quiet and polite, like so many of us did, nobody's going to be reaching out to help you because everyone is so busy and focusing on the kids who seem like they're drowning. So self-advocacy, learning how to do that. We can't keep doing that for our kids. They have to learn to do it themselves. Also getting themselves places, please teach your kids how to drive. I promise you, being on my third teenager, I understand how scary it is to be in the car and watch your teenager drive around. And then that day when they just drive off and you're not in the car, it's terrifying. But I am seeing a lot of kids now who are not getting their license and they're not even taking responsibility for getting themselves anywhere. This is a really important life skill, whether they take the bus, whether they take the metro, whether they ride a scooter, take their bike, preferably driving, but they need to be in charge of their own community navigation so that they're ready when they go off to college or the military or gap year, whatever it is. And of course, face-to-face socializing, it's much harder than socializing online. And this is why we need our kids engaged in the community, not sitting in their bedroom. We often think that if a kid is sitting in their bedroom on TikTok, that they're safer. Nothing could be further from the truth. TikTok, Instagram, all of these things can be fun, but they are also tremendously toxic forces in our kids' lives. They need to be doing face-to-face socializing. And of course, tackling problems with a supportive coach, very important. Remember the power of mentors, guides, coaches, and relationships. In terms of what motivates humans most of all, it's not money, it's not prizes, it's not grades, it's not treats and privileges, it is relationships. And the more strong relationships that you allow your child to build with people beyond you as the parents, I'm talking about positive people in their lives, guys like Dumbledore, this is where kids will really push themselves. And I've seen parents who have tried to like pay their kids to get good grades, or give their kids extra privileges. If you get straight A's, I'll buy you a car. One mother said she would buy her kid a parrot. This is not actually what really sparks that sense of motivation, that willingness to feel safe taking risks and work really, really hard. The key thing is the relationship. They're doing it for somebody they love, and then they do it for themselves. And here's we're bringing it to a close, right? Building resilience, chores and responsibilities. You want to get proactive. Remember, teach your kids the skills they're going to need. Don't just assume that the school's taking care of it. We want our kids to make conscious choices about what they're going to do, like clubs, sports. Don't try to do it all. Life isn't about your college application. It's about being a full, self-satisfied human being who feels like you are enough. Self-advocacy, getting themselves places, face-to-face socializing, tackle problems with a coach, a mentor, a tutor, a clergy person, a guidance counselor, a therapist, somebody who can support you. And by you, I mean your child, somebody who can support your child in getting through those tough, frustrating times. And of course, be open to the fact that every now and then your kid's going to fail. And what we do with failure is not sit and think, oh, I'm never going to try that again. We learn from it and we move on. And that is the end of my talk. And hopefully I stayed within the time limit. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now and turn it back over to Wendy.
Awesome. Hopefully this is working and you guys can see it. Let's see here. Questions and answers. I think that's where we're at this point. Rebecca, thank you so much. I am going to pull up. Let's see what we have here. Questions. Always fun to get this going right. If you have questions, I had noted if you could please put them in the chat. Go ahead as I try to track down the little chat button. If you could put them in there, that would be fabulous.
So we have 4, but these are probably housekeeping in nature, but let's see.
Oh, okay, sure.
I don't know. Do you want me to open it?
Yeah,
Hopefully
for
it would be
some
like,
reason it's not. Yeah, I don't see the 4th one for some reason. Maybe it would just went to you.
I don't know. Let's see. Hopefully nobody put anything in like, Rebecca, you've gained so much weight since your headshot, that kind of thing. Let's see. Looks like these are all housekeeping. So if anyone has questions or has other ideas to share, something that I didn't cover, by all means. It looks like Jonah's on for next week.
It is next month. Yeah, no, I didn't mean to do that. I was trying to pull up actually something else here. So let me
No
see
problem.
if I can do that. Here we go. Usually much better at this. Let's see here. Lindsay, are you there? Do you have the questions?
I am. If you want to give me a few minutes, I can go ahead and
Sure. Let me
get
just stop
some
sharing for
for
1
you.
second, and then I can go through now that I can have this up.
We've got quite a mix. We have Sheila Irvin's here and Ryan is here, and
yeah, I saw that it
professionals
was,
in the mix too.
yeah, it was interesting.
Oh, that's a really good one, actually. So someone asked, if you have not instilled chores within the kids early on, how can you start when they are teenagers? Is it too late? There's a lot of pushback with teens. I know exactly what you're talking about. Yes. And yeah, it's not easy, and it is so much easier and faster just to do the dang thing yourself. So many times. I think it's okay to say to the teenagers, like, validating, um, hey, you're at a certain age now where we really need you. It's nice to be needed, even if being needed means you have to unload the dishwasher or take out the stinky garbage. I don't lift heavy stuff anymore. Now that, I have a kid on the wrestling team. And so I'll often, text him and say something like, hey, the garbage is really heavy. Can you take it out? Now, of course, it's heavy because my teenagers and my husband don't like to take the garbage out. So what they do is they stuff like 100 pounds worth of junk in there to the point where the bag is like, you're trying to lift it and it's like straining and the straps are breaking off. I'll often just take a picture of, say, an overflowing trash can or a sink full of dirty dishes, or I'll take a picture of the dog and I'll just text it to whomever. And they tend to get the message with that. But really letting them know, like, I actually need your help. At this point in my life, I can't do everything, and I need you. Letting them know that they're competent and that their help is important and valued often changes it a bit from, you're being so lazy, why don't you, get rid of that dirty dish. Also sitting down with them, kind of one-on-one and saying, like, I'm so busy right now, I'm really tired. I need your help. I'm wondering if you have like preferences for which chores you feel like you'd be willing to take on. Um, you don't have to have that conversation immediately. You can just sort of text it them or leave them a note, and they'll often get back to you with like, okay, well, I really hate doing the dishes, but I prefer laundry. And then setting up like a schedule. If they feel like they have some kind of choice in it, they're usually a bit more amenable to it. But yeah, I'll always send them a picture of whatever chore I want done, instead of like going up and pounding on the door and being like, "Why is that goddamn sink full of dishes?" Which is what I kind of really want to say.
Yeah, I feel like the boys really respond when you say, I do a lot of stuff all day. I'm working, I'm doing this, and that. I really need your help with something. That little bit of guilt, or at least it opens up their eyes that how much we do for them versus what, their job is really school and homework, and that's great, but they could also help around the house. We have a few more questions that I want to get through. So, how do you support a teen with anxiety that gives up on himself? How do you help find a coach or mentor that fits? I can tell you that we have those folks. That's one of the things we do is work with students to understand that they should have strong self-confidence and self-esteem, and we take them through the steps to figuring out how to find that, whether it's coaching them to feel success in the school day and how they're doing academically, or whether it's to coach them if they're, at home or socially not having things go the way they want. We work through that and coach them to help them to find those relationships or to get that feeling that really kicks in the dopamine in the brain to make everybody feel good. And that's really important. And you start with really small things if you're doing it yourself. And I don't mean to step on Rebecca, I'm going to let her say, but for us,
No, go for it.
the most important thing is to start very small. Every little thing gets praise because then every little thing gets a little dopamine hit. And it's just like a screen giving a dopamine hit. This is something that will give the kids a feeling of success, like they did something. Maybe you're proud. Maybe it's just a thank you that they're there. All of those things start to build upon each other, and they want to get that hit of dopamine more and more often. And so try to find ways to always praise versus finding ways to cut them back. Just using Rebecca's example from before, instead of, hey, why isn't the trash taken out? Walking in and saying, hey, I had a really rough day today. I've got to make dinner. I have to unload the dishwasher. Hey, Joey, do you think you would mind taking the trash out for me? That would be really helpful. And oh, don't forget the recycling too. And then if they forget, you have an ADHD child, you have a child with learning differences, or they're just distracted on their screens, remember, just remind them later, say, hey, do you think you could still do that for me? And I find that really works. And it also gives them a feeling like they're helping out in the household. They're helping to be a contributor of the family, and that you really do notice them and that you're proud of them when they do these things. Okay, really quick, I'm going to give Rebecca the floor while I have other questions I have to read out to you. So go ahead, give your 2 cents and I'll read another question.
No, you did a beautiful answer. I don't really particularly have anything else, but yeah, the incremental building on success. Rick Lavoie, the famous educator, has this great saying. People always say if he would try harder, he would succeed, but that's backwards. If he could succeed, he would try harder. And so, yeah, if the parent-child dynamic it feels off, trust your gut there, and you can get there's tutoring like at Wendy offers, but there's a lot of helpers in the world. And oftentimes for a teenager, they really do need someone outside of the parent-child relationship because there's too much strong emotion a lot of time, especially if a kid is feeling incompetent and ashamed and anxious. So getting somebody who's not you in the mix to start making a less emotionally intense space for them to try new things. For example, a summer camp like Kaleva, for example, has like a leadership and training program that I highly recommend where, kids are pushed to do all sorts of intense things, and they get them to because they're not their parents. So.
Yeah. Okay. So, I've tried to get my 12-year-old to walk or bike to friends' houses around the neighborhood, but he has a hard time with directions. He struggles with, in particular, spatial directions, understanding like probably how to get there and such. And any practical kids for kids like this that have visual challenges, in addition to ADHD.
Well, so first off, good for you. Because I also have watched my children's freedom shrink compared to what my freedom was like as a girl. And it is really important for parents like you to set the tone for other parents. Like biking to another kid's house is fine. They are not in more danger of biking to somebody else's house than they are sitting in their room on social media. So yeah, but again, it's really hard. And I feel you. I'm terrible with orienting in space, but I'll tell you what I'm really good at is landmarks. And not everybody's brain processes visual spatial information the same way. For some of us, we use a strategy called what we call verbal mediation. And so for my husband, he's great at just like being, this is north, and then you go east. My brain doesn't work that way. So for me, I'm telling a story to myself. You go to the McDonald's with the terrible parking lot, and then you turn left at the Popeyes, and then you go right by the swim center, and that's how you get to my office. So for me, I'm turning it into a verbal task. So, you know, co try to get a sense of, what type of learner your kid is and how they process information really well. It might be that just writing down the steps on a little card that you put in his pocket, and so that he can just sort of pull out every now and then. Maybe you practice where you drive the car behind him for a while. Hopefully your neighbors won't think you're a pedophile. And you can just let him practice until it becomes procedural memory and he can just do it without even thinking about it.
Okay, I'm gonna shoot you with this last question. I think there probably might be more that pop up. Oh yes, there already are. Okay, so here we go. My 16-year-old daughter with ADHD is struggling with an elective AP class that she really wanted to take, but really isn't putting the time required into it. She was out sick for a week and missed a lot, and she hasn't done all the things that she needs to catch up, so her grades dropped. She has one more test this Friday and then the end of the quarter, and it seems like she's given up. She's avoiding and not studying. I'm not sure how to support her. You're welcome to give us a call. I'm happy to walk you through that or provide someone that can help you with that. I think the best thing is to encourage her to break things down into little pieces and little chunks. Again, it's rewarding the effort over what the grade is at the end of the day. You really wanted to take this class. You can still do well. I'm sorry you were sick. Let's sit down together and work through how can we get there by Friday? How can we get things done? Have you reached out to your teacher? Have you said you were sick? Is there extra time you can get? Or is there like you only do half the assignment? Those kinds of things, self-advocating for yourself and reaching out can be really helpful too. But try to support her in that and try to encourage her. I know sometimes it's like oil and water. That's why, as Rebecca and I say, bring in a third party. It makes a huge difference. But those are the things that you can start right away, at least from my side. We do all sorts of things like that to break down things, make sure that the kids feel like they can accomplish the little things and get through them. And then also getting some leeway, especially if she was out for a week, getting some leeway from the school would be really helpful too. Rebecca?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, for a lot of kids, they feel like an AP class, like they have to take this huge looming test at the end of the year. They don't actually have to, so you could talk with her about how you get better at AP tests as you go along. AP classes, they tend to have a lot of things in common, the STEM ones and the more liberal artsy ones. And learning to succeed in an AP class is a skill. And it's the kind of thing that you have to practice and get good at. Nobody's good at that all the time. It's something that takes time. And acknowledging for her, like, wow, that being out for a week, that seems like it's been really overwhelming for you trying to like get back on the horse. And then reminding her of some circumstance where she actually really did show you some resilience or some grit, where you were really proud of her when you saw her face some adversity and like get through a tough situation. Every one of our kids has done something that we can point to with pride and be like, I remember the time you I mean, we could literally say a horse. When you fell off that horse when we were on that trail ride, but I remember you got right back on and you finished the whole thing. So I know you have that kind of grit inside yourself. It's just, we're gonna figure out a way to get it turned back on. And yeah, talking with somebody like Wendy, talking with a guidance counselor, having her sit down with the teacher and reminding her, like, your first AP class, it doesn't need to have an A plus and it doesn't need to have a 5. This could be your practice AP class. Let's just figure out how to do our best in this class, how to get through. Even if it's not going to be perfect, you're going to figure this out. And next time it's going to be a lot easier.
Remember, it's just one, if it's in public school, it's 1/4 grade too. So it's okay if she doesn't do quite as well.
Exactly. The colleges will
And
never
let her off the hook for that. If she feels like she's going to disappoint you, make sure she knows she's not disappointing you. Okay, thank you. Moving ahead. How to transition from a parent-teen relationship where it's primarily do this or do that. Did you do this? Did you do that? More strained relationship, etc., to a more meaningful conversations and experiences of really enjoying each other's presence and time. It just feels so stressful and strained parenting teens, and sometimes it feels like the joy of the relationships gets buried under the strain.
Oh, yes, that happens a lot. Yeah, so there's a wonderful book I'll recommend to you since our time is running out. It's an old classic. It's called How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk by Adele Faber and Elaine Maslish. The teenage version is How to Talk So Teens Will Listen and Listen So Teens Will Talk. There's also, Wendy, do you remember what Dan Siegel's book is called?
On my shelf real quick.
The red one
with names. Yes.
The red one.
I'm horrible with book names.
Oh, Brainstorm. It's called Brainstorm.
Yeah.
It's like Brainstorm, the power and purpose of the teenage brain. Your relationship does change and it's often really painful. And there's a lot of grief a lot of times when the relationship that used to be so easy and close all of a sudden feels weird. And I've heard it likened to, it's almost like you're with your romantic partner and they're having an affair. It has that feeling of like, but wait, I thought we were close. I thought we were good, because you are having a relationship with a different person. And what I have found with my own teenagers is not every moment was perfect, I guarantee you. But the more that I talked with them, kind of upping the level of respect, talking with them more like they were a colleague than they were a child, they really liked and appreciated that. So like I would know, for a child, I would just, go right into their room and say like, hey, you didn't pick up your clothes. For a teenager, I might text and say, like, hey, do you mind if I talk with you? Is this an okay time for you? Do you mind if we have a meeting about this? Upping the level, even for some formality. I often find that teens really like that and will respond in kind.
Okay, real quick before everyone hops off, I don't mean to cut anyone off, but this has been recorded and we will post it and let you know when it is posted up if you want to share it with anyone or watch it slower or whatever you want to do with it. We feel that it's great to hear Rebecca in any format. So she will be recorded and posted on our site. You'll get an email when that goes up. We are Illumos academic coaching and tutoring, and we do help kids in multiple ways, primarily with their executive functioning skills, which include how to task initiate, how to manage that stress, emotional stability, how to get through their homework, break things down, etc. I think most of the people on this call probably know what EF is. We also have some other services, and I highly recommend Rebecca if you need, and her entire team, if you need testing or some therapy, different kinds of therapy. I think all of her people cover it all at this point. They're a great group. They do in person and they do virtual, so you can kind of have it any way you want. And if you want to reach us, it's just Illuminos, ILLUMINOS. .co or not .com. I'm going to just flash it up there if I can figure out where it is on my screen and go from there. But we really, really appreciate you, Rebecca, you being here, and are very grateful that you took the time today and that you were able to present and then also answer questions. If you have any other questions, by the way, you can reach out to Rebecca. Rebecca, do you want to just give over your your information.
Yeah, people can write to me through the website, resnikpsychology.com. The important thing is don't send a lot of private information. Even though my email is HIPAA compliant, with security features, nothing on the internet is really private. So, keep it general.
So you can take a screenshot of this, and then I'm going to show you Rebecca's information. This is her again. So you can take a screenshot of that. And then Lindsay will get after me if I don't mention who our next month's person is. It's going to be Jonah Green talking about the thoughtful divorce, fostering resilience and growth through stress and transition of a divorce. So if you can join us next month, it's February 19th. But again, Rebecca's information and her website is here. She's a team of fabulous people. Rebecca, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Wendy.
I'll just post up for those that are still here. If you want to take a screenshot and get a hold of us, you can. I'm happy to talk to anyone anytime and do it quite frequently. So you guys all have a good day. Stay warm wherever you are, and we'll hope to hear from you soon. Take care.